Hello everyone. Before we dive in today, I just want to say thank you for the unbelievable support so far since the launch of the podcast. Somehow, we managed to enter the Apple podcast charts in several countries, something for which I have simply no explanation. As you know, trying to keep momentum with new projects is always a challenge. So if you'd like to support further, I'd be hugely grateful if you could rate and review. Those are the metrics that platforms use to determine if a podcast will be shown in charts and feature recommendations. So, into today's podcast, where I'm thrilled to welcome Romanian artist Ioana Pioaru. As creatives or small business owners, we often encounter daunting obstacles such as circumnavigating the gatekeepers of the world, seeking elusive funding, or aspiring for that missing breakthrough. Ioana has taken these seemingly insurmountable barriers head on, and today we explore both her story and the universals which can be drawn from it. With a hand-inked style with qualities of ancient craftsmen, Ioana proves that success doesn't require following modern trends. Her ability to stay true to her artistic vision while adapting along the way illustrates that pivoting doesn't have to mean compromise, and change doesn't have to mean concession. That artistic courage has attracted a following of nearly 250,000 people on Instagram, serving as a timeless reminder that inner courage and staying true to your vision are the deepest foundations on the path to success. I'm your host, Jim Kroft, and if you're ready, let's dive in. Hey, Ioana, how are you today?
Hello, I'm very well, and thank you for the invitation.
Hey, look, it's just absolutely wonderful to meet you, and especially when we're just sort of talking online, and I've just sort of absolutely loved your work and what you're doing, and it's just a real joy to see you face to face.
Thank you very much. It's a real joy to follow your work as well, so I think this is going to be great.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun because one of the things that I loved about what you said just when we were saying hello before we jumped onto the podcast, you were like, oh, you know what? I haven't actually done this type of thing before. And then I was like, oh yeah, but it's really new to me as well. So it's always quite fun with people who've been in the arts quite a long time that we're just doing something new together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, look, I asked because you have such a sort of passionate online following. And so we discussed yesterday about asking some of your followers if they'd like to ask some questions. And one of them just corresponded so closely to where I wanted to start the podcast that I thought I would just start away with that. So Mr. Yash asked us, he said, please tell us about your art journey, how it started, the difficulty you faced, and future projects. Now, of course, in those questions, we've got just about all the other questions that I've got. That's a bit. So I thought, look, out of that, let's just contextualize about your art journey. So your history, where you come from, and where your story begins, Ioana.
Okay. So I'm Ioana Pioaru. I'm a Romanian British. Well, actually, I've only just got my British citizenship about a year ago, so that's freshly British.
Amazing.
Thank you. So I'm a Romanian British artist. I've lived in the UK for nearly 11 years now. Mm-hmm. And my journey with art started when I was 2 years old. Of course,
2 years?
Yes, yeah. I was very passionate about it in my early years. My parents were telling me how almost every day between like 3 and 4, they were bringing me notebooks and I was filling them up passionately and then asking for more. And I have these vague memories about when I was doing that, but of course it's all very vague. So yeah, I was very passionate about it when I was very young, and then when I started going to school, it kind of started to fade a little bit because school was new to me. All the subjects I was learning about were very new. I loved everything. I was curious about everything, and art sort of faded in the background a little bit for a while. And then I don't know, some sort of pragmatic mentality somehow got to me, and I knew I had a talent for art, or I had something, some sort of close relationship with art, but a voice in my mind kept telling me, you shouldn't choose this as a career path. And I was very young when I was having these thoughts, like when someone asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was being very serious about that question for some reason, and I would never say I'm going to be an artist, never, as a child. I would, say, I don't know, an architect was an answer that was popping up a lot, because since I was very young, I liked architecture, and I saw that as a more sort of pragmatic career choice. And then in high school, I studied foreign languages and literature, and I really, really loved that. And that's when I sort of started to make a plan in my mind about what I might, do when I'm an adult. So I thought it was going to be something around that, around this, I don't know, being a translator or a writer or something like that. And then just after I finished high school, and I actually took an exam to go into a university that was to do with languages, and I got in. But then an art tutor from high school kept telling me, "Look, you need to at least try to get into art university. Just try it. It would be a shame to waste your talent, to just let it disappear." And for 3 years while I had that tutor during high school, I kept saying, nope, it's just a hobby. I'm just doing it as a hobby. It's not, I shouldn't really do this seriously. But he insisted so much that I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. Let's see where it goes. So I went to check out what the requirements for art university in Bucharest, and it turned out that it was, the competition was high, and you had to do a sort of 3 weeks mentorship sort of preparation thing there with the tutors in the art university before you took the exam, so that they could prepare you for what the exam was going to be. And I went there being very, very sure of myself, because all my life everybody told me, you are so good at art, you're so good at drawing, and I've been drawing a lot, up until that point. And then I went to those courses, those preparatory courses in university before the entrance exam, and I for the first time I met this mass of people who were super talented, and that was a shock to me,
Yeah.
And also I met these tutors who were very serious about art, about all the the techniques and what the foundational knowledge you have to know to be a good artist,
Right.
things that I hadn't thought about, like value, composition, all of this was totally new to me. It was shocking, like how much I didn't know. And I jumped very quickly from being super sure of myself and of course I'm going to pass the exam, but I don't actually want to do this, to I'm not going to pass the exam.
Yes.
I don't stand a chance, with the stuff I know, or rather with the stuff I don't know, there's no way I'm going to enter. And then I started taking it very seriously. It was a challenge for me, Sorry, did you want to?
Well, no, I was going to say, was that like once you got in, or was that like
no, that was
to get in, the process to get in?
Yes.
So you really, so that's very interesting. So you had to sort of like confront that fear, and you responded to that fear by saying, right, I'm going to go all out with this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was a shock, because in school, I always liked all the subjects. I was, with the exams, I always had top scores and everything. And I was used to being good at everything, and suddenly there was this thing that I thought I had it under the belt, and actually I didn't know anything about it. Or that's what the sort of criteria in that course made me think, that I didn't know anything about art, that I didn't know enough to get in the university. So I started taking it very seriously, and those 3 weeks were really, really intense. I remember going in the studio with all these other people who already knew all the foundational stuff, I like for 4 or 5 hours every day we were doing intensive art making, and studies from life and all kinds of things that could have come up at the exam.
How did you respond to that pressure? Because that's very interesting, that you went into this environment where there's a clear result that you want to get to, and you're under tremendous pressure, and you're realizing something in you that want to be an artist. So did it affect your ability, or did you find a new focus? What was like your experience psychologically under that pressure?
Psychologically, I was very low, actually. But I was used from because my high school was quite competitive and very good. I was used to making an effort, like to learning a lot, listening to the tutors, listening to what they were saying, and trying to do what they asked. So I just took it as a challenge, and although I wasn't happy with what I was doing, I didn't want to give up. I was just going through this process.
Yeah.
And it was 3 or 4 weeks, I can't remember exactly, and then the exam day came, and I was still under the conviction that I had absolutely no chance to get in. Because I don't know, I mean, it was very intense, but I didn't feel like I had gotten to the level where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
But I did get in. I got in, one of the last students on the list, but I got in, and I was so happy. I don't think I've ever been up to that point. I had never been so happy in my life.
Wow. So did that really signify something in you, because you'd been a sort of child prodigy of sorts, or at least you had that absolute passion and love when you were growing up, but then you were sort of, doing it at school. But then it's so interesting how I find it's very interesting how at certain points in our lives, angels or guardians come out. And what I find so lovely in this story is that you had the teacher who was like, Ioana, you've got to have a go at this, if you're feeling it. And that you went under that profound pressure and you went in there. And I find it so wonderful when a young person has that instruction or that key person that just puts them on your way. But the thing that I find particularly interesting is it sounds like that desire to get in, like it sparks something in you about, hell, I do want to be an artist. Would that be a correct assertion?
I don't know. Actually, I think that desire was more the competitiveness in me.
Yes,
At that age, I had no idea what I was doing. It was just that suddenly I was faced with the challenge, and I was used to winning challenges.
That's
so
interesting. So you were stimulated by the competition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I mean, it took a long time for me to realize that I was just fulfilling my destiny, sort of,
Sure.
But at that point, I was too immature for that sort of thinking process. It's just.
But it's very interesting. This let's just return to your story in just a second. But I find it very interesting, the different ways that we need to find our motivation in life. And, one of the things that I love in your work, and we'll come to this later, but is you have this very deep reflection. I love how you write and how you use words, and it's like an invitation into your art. And I always just get a sense of a spiritual nourishment that exists within you and your process. And I also find it so interesting that aspect of competition, because, biologically we had to, get out of the ocean, and then, as mammals survive the dinosaurs, we've got that survivor instinct in us. And that's something like very profound and very beautiful, in the way that life is, that we have to keep going through our lives. And some of that with motivation, sometimes there's a sort of a yay in one's motivation, and sometimes there's a nay in one's motivation, and you can be stimulated by a challenge, and it's like, hell, I've got to get through this. But do you find, like, at this point in your life, and I know we're just jumping ahead, but just want to follow the thought, do you find like do you find any motivation in a competitiveness with something in yourself or in the world? Is that something, or have you sort of found a deeper peace with that side, just as a reflection?
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't have that competitiveness anymore.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the age, perhaps.
Yeah.
I've gone over that stage, and yes, just like you said, I found a sort of peace.
Yeah.
And I understand that this is my calling. I'm taking it very seriously. It's like a responsibility. I understand I have this gift that I was given by the stars. I don't know what
Beautiful.
it is, and it's my duty to make the best of it, to use it to bring my contribution in the world the best I can. So I'm not in a competition with anyone. Rather, I bring my, how do you say, I bring my contribution, along with other people who try to make the world more better or more beautiful, or whatever. So
it's so interesting the way that, but what I love is that you can recognize that there was that fire and that competitiveness and that goal to get in, but then it's also such a wonderful reflection to feel that you've integrated that aspect into a much sort of like deeper pool inside your spirit. And I mean, it was strange because that was actually that was my feeling from the way that, because I was like, oh wow, I would have like put a sense of competitiveness from the very kind of deep research that I did kind of going into. But then again, on the other hand, it's like we're motivated by different things. And I think that, to become highly skilled in something, I think one needs to feed from a whole massive pool of different psychology and struggle and motivation. So for you got into the art school and that was a sense of relief. And so what happened from that point?
My pragmatism never really left me. So the thing is, I got in with the idea that came perhaps from my family or from my environment, that art can't get you a proper career. Like you can't make a living out of art. But then when I got into university, I understood that that this was in the early 2000s. So that there was a completely different environment in the world compared to when my parents grew up. I mean, there's a whole industry around creatives. So it wasn't the case that you couldn't make a living with art or with with creativity, because you could be a designer, you could be an illustrator. So even if you weren't going to be an artist, like a professional fine art person, you could still use the skills you would learn in university in order to make a living. So that was kind of my backup plan. I was like, if everything else fails and I can't be an artist and do what I want, I can be an illustrator, I can be a designer, and I did actually. I mean, for many years I worked as an illustrator. I worked in the games industry. Yes, yeah. So I was doing these jobs that I knew they weren't really fulfilling my potential, but they were kind of fulfilling my need for security, like for financial security. And I had stable jobs, that.
But so you had a trust in, when you were studying, in the potential of the transferable skills that this was going to lead somewhere. And that's very interesting. And did you, I don't, so I have a friend who I interviewed on a podcast, wonderful guy called Dean. He's an amazing Bulgarian musician, comes from a little town, and he was just like, I am never going to make it in a music industry as he hoped to do so. And he was also singing English language. So that was actually what propelled him out into the world. And he traveled and worked on boats and all over the place. At what point did you start getting a sense that you might migrate out of Romania and out into the world? So at what point did you leave?
I left a few years after I graduated my MA, and after I'd worked in Bucharest with different companies, being a graphic artist. So I worked with a games company, and then I worked with another company making, like, I was making illustrations for tutorials or for books and things like that. I was also working as an illustrator for a publishing house. So I came to the UK 2 or 3 years after I graduated, and it was out of a whim, really, more than anything else.
And so what was the whim?
Well, I have to go back a little bit. During my university years, when I started to discover contemporary art.
Okay.
And, this was another shock for me. The fact that, you could make art that wasn't beautiful. You could make art that wasn't immediately likable and that needed a story and a good story in order to be meaningful. So, and I started, I don't know, I didn't have a great visual culture up until that moment, that I didn't know about the big artists that populate the art world and that everybody knows. And when I first started to learn about them, I thought, wow, this is so different from what I'm doing. This is so different from what we're studying in our, in Romania, in art university. You spend kind of half of your day in the studio. Well, at least in my class, we were spending half the day drawing, just from life, making studies and all that. And the other half was theory. like perspective, anatomy, aesthetics, philosophy, what these theoretical subjects that are somehow linked with art. And art history, I studied art history for 2 years, and it covered universal history, but up to like modernism. And so I was familiar with that, and everything was kind of based on beauty. But then in the last year of my bachelor's degree, we started doing contemporary art, and it was so different, and I was like, right, so what are we actually learning how is what we're learning in the studio work preparing us for competing with these people? Because there was absolutely no connection, or I couldn't see any connection. I felt like our university was not preparing us for the real art world, and I became fascinated with contemporary art, and I looked up to it a lot, and I was thinking how I could start creating in that way, in a way that was relevant for the contemporary art community, let's say, or environment. And that there was a huge conflict there, as you can probably imagine. And then after I graduated, I was like, okay, I have all these skills. I know how to draw really well, but what do I do with it? So the only thing I could think of was to get these jobs as an illustrator, or graphic artist, whatever, because that was actually using those skills. But I didn't know how to be a contemporary artist.
But this is one of the fascinating things I think about your work, because obviously your ink drawing is something that is so loved, and you're so proficient, and you are prodigious in, you create a lot of work. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. But then there's also, when you go deeper in this other side, and you're into holography and the virtual reality and mixing different media. And I was like, oh wow, it's just what it was such an amazing thing to discover, that you're just drawing on and then combining these super on the threshold modern techniques with this very old traditional wonderful craftsmanship that sort of goes back thousands of years. So you left university, and then was that learning about things like holography on your own, or how did it develop?
No, this came much later.
It did, really.
Yes. Yeah, it did. So I had a period of a few years when I was completely stuck, and I just couldn't see a way out of that block, because, again, as I said, I was looking up to these people who are creating this almost, contemporary art. I'm not gonna, try to describe it too deeply. And what I felt like doing, there was no connection there, so I didn't feel like doing anything almost, and I felt like I was wasting myself, but there was a point when I thought, look, I need to just stop agonizing about this. I have to just do something. So I had a quite a long period when I was just doodling. Like I thought, I had this energy in me that said, you need to make something, you need to create. But I didn't know what, because I didn't feel contemporary art. I didn't feel it. It wasn't in me. Conceptual art and all this, I loved it. I could appreciate it, how to say, intellectually, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to do it.
So it wasn't coming out of you.
No, organically
but it feels like there was on some level, there was a sense of should, like I should be trying to engage. Yeah, interesting. Yes. And so that's where and so that's how you would describe the block, is it? As in, there was something that you felt organically that you wanted to do in your own spirit, in your life, and yet there was a sort of pressure in society about, okay, should I be following the trends? Look, let's just go into that for a moment, because something that so many different people feel, it's a sort of rite of passage in your career as an artist, as a creative, as a musician, as a filmmaker, illustrator, whatever it is, that at different points you come across profound blocks in the road. And it's a very archetypal sort of idea, because the artists goes out into the world. And it was lovely how you talked about this angel, this teacher who at a critical point started helping you in this direction or made the critical suggestion. But then a block in the road comes, the obstacle. And it doesn't matter how experienced we are. Well, I think it does get different and easier because we understand it to be a rite of passage because those obstacles come at different stages in our life. But for you, how exactly, two questions, how exactly did you find your way through the obstacle? And secondly, if you were to reflect on the obstacles that you face and to suggest some advice to other artists who are young artists at a critical moment in their career, what would be your suggestions about how to navigate that space?
So the way I got out of the block was by stopping to intellectualize it. Is that a word?
It is.
Like to stop overanalyzing it. Like I said, I spent quite some time just doodling, and it was this. I started drawing these things. They were coming out of me sort of automatically, but I didn't stop. I just thought, look, I'll let my body do whatever it wants, and my mind, And so it had the shape of these sort of machines, lots of pipes and sort of robotic, I don't know, structures and sort of pseudo machinery, like sort of steampunk stuff.
From your imagination?
Yeah.
So you were literally playing. You were playing and doodling and just letting something come out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is what came out. And so I made a few artworks like this, and they got into some exhibitions, and they were well received. And then I started building a little bit more on top of that, and started to. I gave myself sort of permission to start to think about it, because up until that I didn't want to think about it at all.
Okay.
And then it started to develop in lots of different subjects. For example, I started doing these composition where I have there was a house, like a pub or something, and then there was pipes underneath it, so that those are some of my first artworks of liberation, as it were, So and then so I realized that there was joy in the process, if anything, that there was meaning in that. If there was no meaning to my work, at least there was meaning to the process.
Because it was guiding you.
It was guiding me, and it was giving me pleasure, and it felt that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, So I just didn't stop. I kept drawing, and one thing led to another, and I started understanding that there are things that I love in the world, and they are, some people could call them trivial things or unimportant or irrelevant or whatever, but the fact that I love them was meaningful to me, so it was worth my time, exploring them, spending some time drawing them, understanding them, whatever. So and the love that I put in these projects without thinking about the outcome or without thinking about whether anyone's going to like them, it actually made people like them, because that love comes out somehow, like the energy that you put into a project is perceived by people, somehow. It's like a heart-to-heart communication.
Well, I love how you describe it and how you link. It's like you're describing the way that you discovered your own process and figuring out that this sense of meaning and love is, out of that ritualization of I will do it for the sake of it because I love it. And I see that as being good and meaningful in and of itself. And what I find so profound is, which I didn't know, is that you figured that part of your process out of stuckness, out of a block, a young woman going out into the world, unsure how you're going to make your living and all the rest of it. And you used play and you followed your spirit, and it was the spark to the rest of your life, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It was very liberating. And if you ask me if I can give advice to anyone, who feels stuck like that, I would say, listen to your inner voice. There's always a voice that tells you what to do, and often you block it. Or there's another voice that doesn't come from you, it comes from someone else, but you've internalized it, who stops that authentic inner voice, So try to find that authentic inner voice and go with it at least a little bit and see what happens. For me, that's what it was. I thought, why not? I feel like drawing beautiful things. Let's just go with it. So what if it's irrelevant? So what if the contemporary art world doesn't care about this stuff? It doesn't matter. I'll just do it anyway and see what happens. And the magical thing that happened was that all the people, thanks to Instagram actually, all the people who are kind of on the same wavelength as me, they saw it, and we came together, and another kind of community developed around this, around my art, So okay, maybe major galleries don't find my art interesting or whatever, but there's a huge community of people who do find it interesting, and they engage with it and they like it, and that means a lot for me.
Well, no, let's just hold on there, Ioana, because like your community is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, when you put up a post, the amount of love, and what I find so interesting is that when I was going deeper into the comments of what people are, it's not saying and reacting, it's what they're feeling. It's like, and this is what I found so interesting as I went deeper into how into your artwork and what you put out into the world, because it's not just the profound level that you have reached as an artist and your knowledge of your process and all the rest of it. People are finding something through what you're putting out, and they find it in the work, and they also, I think, find it in the words and in the message and in the value. So at what point did it start triggering for you in terms of you like, okay, hold on, something's happening, the world is beginning to notice? When did that start happening?
It was, I think, a couple of years ago, probably, when I really, really started to allow myself to draw beauty. Just to stop that voice that was saying beauty is not relevant today. This is old stuff. But and the more I did it, and the more people engaged with it, the more I realized how important it is. And then and then I actually I should say this because I think it's important. I went through a phase when I felt like I needed therapy, so I did therapy with an amazing coach. Actually, it's something between coaching and therapy. And she kind of encouraged me to go deeper into myself and to understand what my core values are. And I'd never thought about it up until then. What are my core values? What's that core value? But it was illuminating, okay, I'm going to think about this. And the thing that popped up all the time was beauty. That started to create a whole lot of meaning around this, because when I think about beauty, I don't think about the external appearance of things. I think about, okay, there's that. Yes, it's aesthetic. It's, I don't know, pleasing, visually pleasing things, right? But there's a reason why people call them visually pleasing, and there's a reason why they bring so much joy to people. And I think it's this joy that you feel when you look at something beautiful. I think that's the essence of it. It's like it gets you out of the mundane. Beauty gets you out of your everyday life, and it puts you in front of this object that you contemplate, and it kind of brings you closer to your spiritual potential, let's say. When you look at something beautiful, you don't think about, is it useful? It kind of makes you a better person if you think about it. I'm probably being a little bit incoherent here, because there's
not
a lot
at all. Follow it. Please just follow it, because it's in that. It's for me, that is the art. It's like I think of the artist as a communicator between two worlds. You have the ephemeral world and you have the physical world. You have the mind, you have the body. And, why do we need our artists? We need our artists because they are the crazy ones who are betwixt those two worlds. It's that kind of visionary or mystical type of role. So, and I think the amazing thing is not that there is a simple interpretation, it is the figuring out of it itself. So please follow the abstraction, because I find it fascinating, and I think other people do, because what I'm trying to figure out and what other people are trying to figure out is like how you render something. What is it? What's the Ioana-ness that leads to that? And I think that's what you're exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one thing popped in my mind when you were talking and focusing me, and thank you for that. My sort of slogan or credo, let's say, it comes from Dostoevsky, and it says, "Beauty will save the world." And I think it's exactly because when you contemplate beauty, you forget everything and you are at peace. You are like out of the meanness of the world, out of the, I don't know, trivial. It's just you and that thing, and you're at peace, and it brings you joy, and it's everlasting. Somehow it touches you in a way that is very human, and it's also spiritual and maybe divine. I don't know. So I think that's why I think art that keeps that connection with beauty, it has the capacity to bring good in the world, because if more people engage with that, if more people have the chance to engage with beauty, it will take them out of the competitiveness and the fight and the hatred and it brings you into this space where you are at peace. So, I mean, it's a long way, obviously, to that, and life is complicated and difficult. But I think the more you increase those moments and the potential of those moments to occur, on a universal scale, the more chances you have for, world peace.
Well,
I don't know, it sounds like a little bit.
But let it. It's like, if we're not going to believe in that conceptualization and the meaning of it, then why the hell are we doing this? It's like, well, I agree. I think that the arts can promote peace way beyond slogans and sloganeering, but it, like you said, in and of itself, in the meaning. And that's what I just absolutely love about how passionate people are, and so many people, when they're following you online, they are just discovering something that it's almost like something's missing in the world, and it's fulfilled in that, or that they can identify with that part of themselves that yearns for that, and they respond to your work. And I mean, it's so interesting because this is kind of like Neoplatonic idea of the being this aspect of perfection, but we as human beings, we can never quite get to it. I think Michelangelo talked about it. He talked about the dreams. So let me just remember, it's the dreams of sleep. The human experience as being like the dreams of sleepers and the ravings of madmen. And, because everything is on the surface so messed up and imperfect. And, sometimes I think nowadays everyone can feel this big pressure, because I think maybe it's also because of the nastier side of social media, that we're always so aware of all the terrible stuff that does exist and the rest of it. But then again, none of the beautiful things or the wonderful interactions are really reported. It's always the sort of the bad stuff. And yet people have this yearning. And, and it's like, when I think about something that you wrote, and you were talking about a tree being the most difficult, one of the most difficult things to evoke poetically, or even as it is, because it has this chaos aspect, and you can see it, but you can't see it, and it's three-dimensional, and it's speaking at you, and you're like, wow, how do I capture this? And what you're doing in your art is you're capturing, it's like the essence-ness of the tree. It's like the idea within the tree, like in that Platonic thing. And it doesn't mean that the idea itself has to exist like in and of itself, but that's the job of the artist, to see the perfectedness that's within the creation itself. And I that's how I respond when I see your art, because I feel like you're transcribing. And it's not just the beauty, it's like you've got the chaos of the tree, but you've also got that love of architecture and dilapidated things. And it's like, I remember you were talking about the Romanian buildings when you were back in Bucharest, and there was this part of you that was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but to start with, because you were trying to deepen your relationship with your home country, and you went into it, and at the start you were finding it difficult because you had all these beautiful things that were fragmenting and sort of eroding, and you're like, well, why aren't we protecting these things? And then the deeper you were painting, you were drawing them, you started to appreciate, okay, it's the fragmentation of itself, and that I can love and step into. And that is also, I think, the role of the artist, that you see reality as it is at this point in time, with all its destruction, all its erosion, all its beauty, and all its flaws, but you can capture its inner reality somehow.
Yes, and that's why I always say, look at the world with eyes wide open. I mean, okay, I draw beautiful pictures, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to the to what's wrong in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you shouldn't let the wrongness completely swamp the beauty and the fact that there's still things that we can do, and the fact that we can still enjoy life, at least, up to a point, and we can still find peace, in this life. So yeah, and what you were saying about perfection, it's funny because I get a lot of comments from people who say your work is perfect, and it's funny because I don't consider it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I know all the imperfections that are there, but yet people feel like using that word perfection, and I think it's not. I think it's because maybe they relate with the world, with the work that they see on a level where they see perhaps the sereneness that is necessary in order to bring that sort of work into existence. It's not that the lines are perfectly straight,
Yes.
or that that a face is rendered perfectly. There is actually no perfection. It's just the peacefulness, or the sort of state of mind you have to put yourself in, one, to create that, the patience you need to invest in the work, to bring it into existence, and also the sereneness of the viewer, when they come in contact with that, and that is some form of perfection. Is like I was saying earlier, is like the contact with beauty, is like contact with the spiritual, in a certain sense.
Well, that's one of the things that I also really love about your work and how you present it online, because you are always expressing your process, and something that I try to be a voice for to artists, because I think a lot of artists struggle with the difference between artwork and content, and feel kind of cheapened to some degree by the need to make content, feel very blocked about the digital world and so on. And one of the things that I really love about your work and how you present yourself, Ioana, is that you go so deeply into your process, and that includes the mistakes. Like I was just watching the other day, like a video, and it's a compilation of all the different mistakes you made. And if I may just read something back to you from your own writing, because I wrote different stuff down because I love your writing. And so I'm going to read two quotations, then maybe you can respond to them and expand. So, a mistake is a very relative thing. For a perfectionist, even the slightest deviation from the intended trajectory of a line is a mistake. I see the deviations, but I embrace them and refuse to let them hinder my progress. And this was so interesting. When I was looking at your work, I was like, okay, now I can see that it's a sort of like manifestation of miniature imperfections, but your state of being renders it into this wonderful, pleasing thing. And just before you respond, I'll just read you one more, because I think it's really nice for people to hear it, because I think your words are so lovely and impactful. And you say it takes mental strength and a lot of experience to get to that point where you notice your own mistake and simply decide to move on, trusting that everything will turn out well in the end. And so just from that, with this making mistakes, if you could maybe draw out a life lesson, or the life lessons that you've learned through your creative process with making mistakes and learning to adapt to it.
So yeah, I I am, or I used to be, a perfectionist. I mean, I struggle with this. I do see all the deviations. That is very true. I see every mistake. And, there used to be a time when that would really give me this sinking feeling. Oh my God, how am I going to recover from this?
Uh-huh.
But I think this is part of maturing as an artist and as a person. You just move on. It's so small, and like I said, it's relative. I mean, I see it because it happens while I'm looking at it, and I say this all the time to everybody who's asking me about what do you do when you make mistakes. By the end of the process, and I know this through experience, by the time I finish a drawing, all of those imperfections are completely invisible. Nobody knows about it. And even if I know they are there,
Yes.
the overwhelming feeling is, it's just the overall picture.
Yeah.
It's the overall picture, the message, the energy that went into it. It's not the mistakes. And who's hunting for mistakes? And why would you look at mistakes? And this is what I tell people, forget about the mistakes. People will feel your energy, the energy that you put in that picture and what you wanted to say with it. It doesn't matter that a line's a little bit crooked, but this comes with time and with trusting the process. And I can't emphasize this enough. Trust the process. Go through all those motions and finish that part of the drawing and that other part, and before you start judging it, just finish it. That's it. It's so important to bring a piece of work to completion before you start judging it. Because, sorry, and I'm just one more thing that I want to say. Almost every drawing I work on goes through the ugly phase, the phase where I can't believe I'm gonna be able to make anything out of it, and I feel like throwing it away. But I know I know that I'm going to be able to fix it. It's not even about fixing. It's just a perception thing. It looks ugly because it's not finished.
But I think it's probably very reassuring to other artists going, wow, an artist of your stature still struggles with, even within the process where you can hardly look at it because you're having self-doubt, even though you've got to that conclusion so many times before.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
But I also find such a life lesson within the metaphor, within that you're having this experience and you're noticing all the imperfections and you are just in a sort of state of peace with the fact that everything. I mean, I'm sure you have times when you're really in the zone and it's just it happens, and that's the wonderful artistic flow. But it's just a wonderful reflection about having this broader trust in life that if you are doing your best within each line that you draw, and you're doing that with all your heart, that even though if you look at it as a microcosm, it all looks like a disaster. But if you trust that process and you have the courage to finish something, the tapestry is so much greater than what happens in a moment or in the day. And I just love that you share that part of your process.
Yeah. It's so important. Yeah, just finish the work, trust the process.
And in terms, and the other aspect that's that's important, I think, in your work is, of course, patience, which is such an important, and I mean, I don't want to put you on a pedestal, Ioana, but when I look at your work, I'm like, wow, there's this Zen peace that you seem so within the process. So I have two questions about it. One is not about the patient. It's about before the patience. So do you experience resistance to sitting down before you get to the patience, before you get in the flow? So do you ever struggle with resistance for sitting down? Second question is also on resistance. Do you struggle ever within resistance within the process? And if so, at what point do you unlock this superpower of patience that you seem to have cultivated?
I would answer yes only to the first question. I do experience resistance before I start the creative process sometimes.
How does that feel?
It's the uncertainty of what's going to come out, the uncertainty of whether I'm going to be able to materialize my vision. That's basically what it is. And again, I have to, I have to tell myself, you know what you're doing. You've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
You have a plan. Just go with the plan.
So you're speaking to yourself in that moment. You're psychologically sort of, if you imagine it was sort of adult and a child, but you're literally reassuring yourself, right? But that's a great
Exactly.
technique. That's a great technique to, inner father or inner mother yourself and use that as a strategy. I think that's very interesting.
Yes, and I also realize that a lot of the resistance comes from the ego, the idea that if this doesn't turn out as I wanted and as good as I want it to be, it's gonna look badly on me, or how do I say this? It's like people are gonna think badly of me. It's like, oh, it's going to lower my status, but then again, I remind myself that this is not about me. These ideas that I have and that I feel compelled to materialize into artworks, they come from somewhere else, and they are like messages that I have to send out to the world. And okay, maybe they're going to be imperfect messages, but they will be messages nonetheless. And people will get them and will appreciate them on some level or another. So it's this, it's hierarchy between me, the artist, and the ideas and the gift that I have, and the work that comes through me and that is given to the world as as a message. And I have to always say the message is more important, the work is more important, it's not me. So that's what helps me come out of that resistance and just do it.
So that sense of that there's also a higher idea, and that meaning that goes right back to that blockade in your 20s, finding that meaning, it helps you to get back to it. And so what about like the patience? Like what happens to you when you trigger into that state of patience? And I mean, you obviously know, I would imagine at this point, because you've been so prolific in your life as an artist now, that I suspect you're able to activate that space. But sort of, can you tell us a little bit about the act of patience, maybe a reflection upon it, how to settle one's mind into that spirit, that state of mind, and maybe a tip for other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, yes. So how to get in the zone?
Yes, exactly.
So for me, once I made up my mind that I'm going to work on the thing, it's quite easy to get in the zone. But I go back to when it wasn't quite so easy, and I realized it was important to breathe, to calm myself. It was really important to just take a few deep breaths, and that it's amazing what that does. It just immediately kind of pushes a stop button to everything, all the crazy voices in your mind, and all the worries, all the anxiety, all the self-doubt, and all of that. And you're like, enter into this other zone, when you're like, you know what you're doing, you're here for a reason, and you better get on with it. So that's one thing. Another thing is to create a nice atmosphere around you. Like, make sure your workspace is comfortable and welcoming. And I don't know, if music helps, listen to some music. For example, one thing I like to do when I'm in the middle of the process and there's a lot of repetition going, I like to listen to audiobooks. All of those thousands of lines that happen without my brain almost doing anything, they have this background, this beautiful, meaningful background to them of someone else's work, that is, deep and meaningful, and there's no connection between them, but it's like something for the brain to do while the hand does the automatic motions that it has learned and it knows it has to do.
It's so interesting that state of integration it's almost like you can be in two spaces in the same time. It's fascinating.
And I have to say, I am terrible at multitasking. I can't multitask
so
to save my
yeah.
life. I can't. Yeah. But these two things, because my hand is now so well trained and knows exactly what it has to do, it's almost like a robotic hand, that my brain is completely free during hours.
Mm-hmm.
my studio time. So I have the freedom to
Mm-hmm.
listen to books. And
Mm-hmm.
often I have to say this too, it's often books that I've already read in print.
Oh,
So I know,
interesting.
yes, so I know the plot, and I engage with this whole new experience, which is the audiobook, and it's an actor's voice and an actor playing out this beautiful creation of an
Mm-hmm.
author,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very, very different to reading. It's something else completely.
It's so interesting how you trigger yourself into this space. And one of the things that I find very interesting, possibly unusual about you, is that you have this capacity for this sort of profound patience, ability to stay in one space, which is also, like, for me, an evocation of being, because one has to be comfortable with oneself, first of all, to be in that space. But the other aspect that I find is that a lot of people who have a strong following online can be quite fragmented in their capacity to concentrate, their capacity to focus, and to really go into this zone where I think that great art comes from. So I just wanted to ask you about that, because you seem to have this, I think, almost miraculous capacity to be very present online. You answer a lot of comments, you show your work, you share your work and your process, and yet it doesn't seem to compromise this part of you that can just really go so deeply into the artwork. And I think a lot of artists resist the online stuff because they feel like it's distracting and breaking down or fragmenting their mind from being able to get into this space. So I'm just wondering, how do you handle that? What's the key?
Yeah, it is fragmenting, but fortunately I do get in the zone very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the fact that I have to remind myself to stop now and again, and take a quick video for
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, that
Yeah.
it does break the flow a little bit, not
Mm-hmm.
too much, but I realize the importance of it, so I do that. And also I have to block sometimes several hours in the day, maybe 2-3 hours, to answer comments, because I think it's important. For me it is important. I mean, like I said before, Instagram for me was this avenue towards a community of people who shared my values.
Yes.
So I managed through, the way that
Mm-hmm.
social media and Instagram works. I managed to gather this community around my work that can enjoy it and benefit from it. So
Yes.
I want to keep that going. So although
Mm-hmm.
yes, sometimes it's a pain having to stop the process, I I've integrated it in my sort of duty, let's say, like
Yes.
it's my duty to make the work, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also my duty to show it to the world, and this is how I like to show it.
But I think this is a very key point. So, I mean, I know a lot of artists who just really struggle with the whole online thing at all. And, something that I actually went through a process a couple of years ago where I was considering deleting all my online stuff, because I felt such a sort of disassociation. I'm in my 40s. I didn't grow up where Facebook didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist, and I think there was, on some part of me, this longing for a world that it's not there in the same in the same way. Of course, the world is still there, but our modern experience and also how we do business and how we engage in the world has changed. And one of the things for me, when I went through this period and I went off in my van into the Scottish Highlands and I spent a winter just kind of really thinking over who I was, what I wanted in the world, how I wanted to get involved in it. And I arrived back at the point where I think I really relate with you with this, where it's like I realized, okay, well, one of my most deepest raison d'etre in life is I want to help people, especially struggling people. And I realized I've been through the arts for 20 years. I've got an awful lot of experience and I know that I can pass on stuff. And this is one of the things that motivates me to speak with other artists like you, because we all have our different experiences. And so to tap into that wisdom and share it, I think is something sort of really helpful. But the main thing that I realized was, and I can see this in you, is that you have a love of your audience and also of your message. And from that point of view, you are a vehicle between the two. And it's like you said earlier, there's a sense of responsibility. And I think that's such a wonderful thing, because it's evident to me that you look as your audience as people, and that what you're doing with your life to help them by being present and exchange, putting those messages across. I think it's a very meaningful process, but also I think once you think about it as people and kind of what you can give rather than trying to get something, then it revolutionizes how you feel about it, because it's no longer this thing that you feel like you should do, trying to progress your career. And would you say that that's something that sort of helped you with your discipline with social media, just this fact of being a vehicle for a message, and that being the place where the message can arrive, and a respect coming to it through that?
Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it has become an important part of this whole process that you're describing. The presentation, the contact between the work and the
Mm-hmm.
people. And it's funny because one of the definitions of art that I resonate with the most comes from Graham Harman, who said that the artwork is the meeting between the art object and the beholder.
Uh-huh.
There is no artwork without the beholder. Otherwise the art object is just material stuff. It's just
Mm-hmm.
canvas and oil,
Mm-hmm.
and but without someone to give it meaning,
Yep.
to perceive it and to understand it as art, it's not art. So that's why I feel that it is so important to give room and space to this dialogue to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so beneficial to me too. So on the one hand, yes, okay, it's the people who see the work and they enjoy it and they love it, but it's also all the beautiful energy and love that I get back from all
Mm-hmm.
these people. It's so important for me. I mean, all the comments, I really, I relish in reading them, and they bring me so much happiness, like
Mm-hmm.
to know that I touched another heart with my work, and that it's meaningful to them and that it made their day. And people do share sometimes it's very, very deep insights, and they tell me how, they spend a long time looking at my art and it makes them feel good. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that is very important. I feel like, I've done my job. I've done what I wanted to do when I woke up in the morning.
Mm-hmm. So the takeaway for an artist who's struggling with social media is to remember that it's about that there's an aspect of responsibility to be a channel for that which you find inside yourself. So it's not about
Absolutely. Yeah.
about just you, and it's not about just the artwork, it's not about just the audience, but the role of the artist is almost to be an intermediary between the things.
Exactly, to bring them together. And that is why, I mean, I know a lot of my audience is other artists who want to learn from me, artists who want to understand how to understand my process and how I constructed my social media profile and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I encourage everybody, whenever anyone asks me, how do you do this? What pens do you use?
Yeah.
What paper do you use? I got these questions probably hundreds of times by now, and I answer every time,
Amazing.
because I think it's important. I want to encourage everybody to do art. All these people who feel like they have it in them to do art, they need to be
Right.
encouraged. There
Right.
isn't enough art. You have this message all the time, oh, there's too much art, there's so much art, there's so much imagery going around. And now with AI putting more imagery out into the world, there's too much. No, there's not too much of it. There's not enough beauty in the world. And if more people can bring their contribution to building a more beautiful world, they should be encouraged.
I
So yeah,
find that so beautiful in itself, to be that, seeing yourself as a facilitator of it. And it's also about doing the work, because what you said earlier, it's like, well, I think that the art and beauty can help to make the world a better place and a more peaceful place. But what I love and find so inspiring about how, when you talk about it, Ioana, is that you're like, you've also got to do the damn work. And sometimes the damn work is sitting down, and this person who's trying to learn, even though I've said it 10,000 times before, I will tell them, because I will encourage them. that is making the world better one by one, letter by letter.
Yes, one by one, and sometimes this happens in private messaging, So I could ignore these people, I could just not answer and no one would ever know. But I know that by answering that person who's just a beginner and he wants to know where to start and what to do, or wants a little bit of feedback on their sketch or whatever, I know that for them it's meaningful, and it's important, and I push the cause a little bit further by answering all of these questions.
Well, it's wonderful, and it's also the paradox as well is because you have that love of it and because you're motivated by the message, you also get the kickback, because the thing is that people love it when they are answered by an artist. And of course, the physiology of the algorithm and the rest of it is that trust and that personalness between people means that people comment more and get more interested, and that also helps the message and the artwork come out, as well as being able to be an adult as an artist, surviving off your work and selling it and doing all the other things that the practical things that we need to do to survive and thrive as artists. So a couple of questions on the digital economy. So one is sort of, there's an artist out there and they're just struggling with how to get this whole damn thing online going. And I think you've already shared some really key points about being a channel for your message, about doing the work, about loving the process, about it not getting in the way of the art itself. So that's all really valuable lessons. Is there anything else that you could say to that young artist who's like, I know that I'm good and I know I've got something and I feel the fire, but I just can't get the damn thing going online? Like, what would you say to them?
Persevere. Just keep doing it. I mean, I've opened my Instagram account about 5 years ago, I think, and for 2.5 years I had, like every post was getting just at best 300 likes or something. You can check this. I mean, now that I got a huge following, people go back and like my old stuff. But then for more than 2 years, I was just like pushing a dead horse.
But there must have been, I mean, you say 300 likes. I mean, that's an awful lot for a lot of people. So yeah, there must have been a time when you were having sort of, 3 or 4 people being interested.
Of course, right at the beginning. Yeah. But, I took it from the beginning. I took it very seriously. And I told myself, it doesn't matter what the reception is. I will just keep doing it. I wasn't doing it every day at that point, but I was doing it seriously. I was making sure that the quality of the work was the best that I could do at that point. And just going with that, and brick by brick, I managed to build this sort of structure.
And that I find very interesting. It was a decision. I will embrace this digital world. I recognize, so something in you recognized that something in your career needed a push from somewhere else, and you recognize that the digital world was going to help that. So what sparked the opportunity that you saw in the digital world? Because 5 years ago is not a long time ago. Like, you must have had a period before where you're like, well, I'm not going to do it that way. So what opportunity did you see in the digital world?
I saw the opportunity to get to the art lovers without an intermediary entity like a gallery, for example.
I see, yeah.
I mean, I tried the gallery thing. It didn't work that well. I mean, okay, I have a gallery in Romania who support me. I love them. They're great. But, they have a limited sort of public. And they do what they can, and they have lots of other artists that they represent. They don't focus on me, But I tried getting other galleries, and I got complete ignore.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I have to do something, I mean, how am I going to get my art out there? And the digital world seemed like the right thing, and the magical hashtag, the idea that you put a tag on something and it has a chance to get to the people that are interested in that thing, without someone in between, in that process.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's so interesting because I was speaking with KP, who's someone else I've interviewed, and we were talking about this of resistance, and he was like, well, look, it's like, you have to understand that the digital economy existed, the profound opportunity that there is there, and I just think it's very hard, and I had to go through this because I consider myself quite old-fashioned, like, and I'm an analog type of person, you know what I mean? And I like stuff in hand, and I like art to be there and with process and stuff and with people. And, you know, it's taken me a long time to kind of like revolutionize. But now at this point, it's like, well, there's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, there's a quotation, and this is something that I find like quite inspiring, that ideas are the new oil. And this is one of the things I also was very attracted about your work too, because I think you do such a fantastic job with the articulation of your process and of your art, the why behind what you're doing, and being specific about the fact that you have a message and that there's something that you're trying to put out into the world. It's very artistic. It's not always this fixed message, but there's a looseness within it that you get the spirit of what Ioana-ness is. It just comes through, but you can tell that you work at it, and you do it in this bite-sized way where, you know, every day or a few days, whatever it is that you do online, you really work at the words and the messaging. And that's something that I'm trying to also say to artists. It's like, okay, look, there's this digital economy. I know it's tough, but there is opportunity there. I mean, look at someone like yourself, and you know, you've taken out the middlemen, you've taken out the gatekeepers, and you've done it on your own damn terms. And it's very exciting. And you've seen the opportunity there, but it's not just an opportunity of want. It's an opportunity of like, I will put my gift into the world, and this is the mechanism through which I can do it. And that's how you get over the resistance, because it's like it can be the perfect delivery vehicle if you can keep yourself sane along the way with it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I think I think the message here is, make the algorithm your friend, you know, because so many people say, oh, the algorithm is killing my reach, you know. No, it's not. It's just, you go with it, try to understand it better. It's just a machine, you know. It doesn't have something against you. You just need to get how it works. And that's what I did, you know. I mean, okay, it did. I'm saying now it didn't work for me for 2 years, but it did actually, because, you know, it helped me grow that profile, and slowly, bit by bit, person by person, it pushed my work to a larger and larger community. It doesn't happen immediately, but it will happen if you insist.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing. In, you know, what I find interesting is that you've embraced it as a part of your process. It's not something you're resisting. It's just something it's part of your work. Now, you happen to enjoy it, but it's still work to sit down for 2 hours a day or whatever it is to answer comments. You're tired after an exhausting day. And, you know, I bet you get exhausted after the concentration it takes to, you know, so you're not Jackson Pollock throwing it up onto the canvas. I mean, I'm sure that was exhausting as well. Like, no disrespect to Jackson, but it's a part of the work. And it's like, if you have a message or something that you want to say to the world, that is going to I mean, look at any of the luminaries out there who have ever transported a message. I mean, you look at Nelson Mandela, embodied an idea, and he was in jail for so long, and it never broke him. And his idea it became more and more powerful through that experience. I mean, you know, that type of spiritual power, I can't even imagine. But the point I make is that, you know, we have to do the work as artists, and our resistance is, okay, I think we have to ask ourselves, are we just resisting the work that it really takes to put a message out in the world? And the second thought that I had, it's also about shipping stuff. It's like, you know, like this really helped me when I decided to start utilizing social media more. It was like, stop wanting something back from anything that you're putting out. Put it out with love, not with expectation. And, you know, stuff takes time to reach people, but once it, you know, and sometimes it might take 7 days of putting different types of posts out, but one person might react to it. And if it touches their heart and their spirit, and then you have a conversation, well, then you're kind of in it together. But you have to, you know, like you said, you have to persevere if you're serious about the message, and you got to be tough for a message.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And another thing that I like to tell myself, and it's something you just said just now, expect nothing, be grateful for everything.
Lovely.
Like, when you put something out there, just like you said, put it out with love, don't expect anything back from it. But if something comes back, appreciate it, in whatever quantity it comes. If it's from one person, appreciate it anyway.
Yeah.
Concentrate on that one person. So.
Beautiful one. Well, look, I've got a couple of other questions. Is it okay to keep you for a few more
Yes.
minutes? Is that cool?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
I just like I was just so interested in the sort of like the spirit in your spirituality, which I think we've touched upon in lots of sort of different aspects, or it's like it walks before you. But I think there's different aspects, and I just wanted to sort of like read a quote to you from you again, and then just see what your reaction is to hearing your own thing, because there's such a question and about time and about fleeting things and about the capturing of beauty, and it's just such a deep fabric in I think in your being. So time is the most precious thing we have, and deciding how to spend it is no easy task. Investing so many hours and days into drawing lines may look like madness, yet I have come to love what I do so much that I know I can trust my path to be the right one for me. I couldn't think of a better way to spend the split second I was given on this speck of dust that we call the earth.
This is a quote from, or a paraphrase, I'm not sure, from one of my favorite authors, was a Romanian writer, Mircea Cărtărescu, and he always refers to the world, to our earth, as a speck of dust that lives for a split second. At universal scale, our presence here is nothing. But for us, it's so important. It's everything we have. So that's what I was trying to say. Okay, I don't have much time here, but the time I have, I've made up my mind how I'm going to spend it, and this is what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, no, but I think that's what I love about the reminder, and to value each day and to use the time that you have as well as you can. So this was the question from Jesus Castillo. Do you think your drawings are worth the effort?
Well, he was asking me if I think his drawing are worth the effort. So I went to his profile.
Oh, did you?
And I would like, yes,
Oh, yeah, lovely.
because I wanted to see what he was referring to.
Yeah.
And yes, I think his drawings are worth the effort. He definitely puts a lot of energy and effort in them. So I think he should persevere. But this, for anyone else who might ask themselves this, yes, your effort that you put into making art is worth it, because it makes the world a better place. And the more you put into art, the more you're going to improve, you're going to get better and better, you're going to get your message out to more and more people, and you're going to be more impactful in this world. So yes, definitely it is worth it. You may think that it's not at the moment, you may be unhappy with your results, whatever, but just keep doing it, because it's the best thing you can do.
Jesus, I'm with Ioana. You keep in there, man. You keep going. We're with you. We're all. Now that's the thing. We're a community of artists, so let's keep supporting each other. So, two final things. So, one was another quote I love. You mentioned that your art is your life in a way. And one of the interesting things that I've had to go through in my journey as an artist is to discover that I am who I am and not what I do. And of course, they are very intricately connected, and what you do expresses who you are. But for me, for a long time in my life, I would sacrifice my well-being to such an extent that I would do anything for the path. It was all for the path. And it was like I was just acquiescent to what it was asking of me. And so when you say your art is your life in a way, do you feel like you've arrived in that healthy space where you can put it aside and go and take the breath, as you described it earlier, with life? Or is it too much you? Is that ever something that you struggle with, that you're too bound to it? Or do you feel a sense of peace with it?
It's funny that you picked up on that. It's both. Sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other. And the reason I said my art is my life in a way, that hesitation is exactly that. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm too involved in it. Maybe I should, because I always have these visions, or I don't know what they are, some sort of fears, or I don't know, ancestral anxiety, I don't know, where I think, what's going to happen if I can't do my art anymore? Who am I without my art? Am I still a worthy human being? And that's really difficult to think about. But I have to tell myself, if that moment comes, you're going to deal with it then. You know, in the meantime, you can make your art. You have this gift, just use it to the best of your, and yes, I have to be mindful of, you know, taking breaks and enjoying life outside of the studio, and I do that. But there's always these thoughts, you know, what would happen if I had to stop being, I don't know, if my vision went, you know, bad, or my hands started shaking or something, you know, how would that impact me? And then the answer is, I don't know, but I'm sure I would find something.
Yes. Well, I think, like, if I may offer, I think it's not about finding it if, then, and when, because it's, I think,
of course it's going to happen.
Well, there's that, but it's also, I mean, you know, you feel like such a sort of, you're so sensitive to the workings of your spirit, and so it feels like you're already doing that work, and you have that in a conversation with yourself and with your art, and you know, see therapists, and, or, you know, and have such a vibrant conversation with it. For me, it's like a lifelong process. It's a part of this sense of becoming, of that you can do it, but you're able to not do it. And I mean, for me, I couldn't go on holiday without my guitar, not because I wanted to take my guitar to write a song, but I couldn't do it. I was like, if I don't have it with me, it wasn't identity. It was about, I won't survive, because to such a degree I had become like, it had become like a fixture of my being, if you like. And I just needed to howl. It was a way of getting it out. And I learned that I need to be able to find a different, you know, type of peace, and a different sort of way of being. And it's something I always have to work on. But I think that I feel like I'm becoming stronger as an artist, paradoxically, the more that I can let it go. Because once you start being able to let it go, you're opening yourself up to so many other aspects in the world beyond that direct link. Because that direct link, it can suffocate other experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it's very true. I mean, I think I shared this in one of my posts, that when I go on holiday, or when I go away from the studio, no, actually, when I go on holiday, although I bring all of my drawing stuff with me, I never do anything.
Oh, that's interesting.
And somehow I have this sort of natural way of disconnecting when I'm not in the studio. So I think that's healthy, and that's probably my body saying, you need a break. And indeed, those breaks are so good, because I can take so much of the world in, and I can appreciate what's around me. And, you know, paradoxically, often it's in those moments of mind peace that the best ideas come, you know, like it. I mean, not to say that you should take a break in order to get your best idea, but somehow it happens.
But it's like Shakespeare said, nature abhors a void. You know, nature hates a void. And that's the thing. You create the space, and of itself, it fills up. And, you know, I'm not there yet. But I know that I'm so much further than I was like 10, 15 years ago. And that's the lovely state of becoming. And that's part of the reason that we're artists, is that we're trying to learn this stuff. And, well, look, just a last, I wonder if you would sort of jump off a cliff with me here. Would you be willing to shut your eyes and to just give for a moment a message to the world of what you would like to say at this moment? And you could say it, imagine it perhaps to a struggling artist, or just to anyone who's struggling out there. Would you be willing to do that?
I can try. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to close my eyes.
Well, then let's try it with our eyes open.
This is my mantra. Keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
I would say, give as much. Oh, sorry. Oh, happened suddenly.
It's a sign.
Give as much time as you can to beauty, because it's going to come back to you in ways that you would never have dreamed of.
Wow, you formulated that so beautifully and succinctly, and I will take that into the rest of my day and week. Ioana, I want to say thank you, and not just, well, for different reasons. First of all, for like all the ways that you inspire, because I think someone like you, like you show leadership about how to go about this challenging path that we're on, and it's inspiring, and it gives a lot of us sort of hope in what we're going through in our personal lives. And also thank you for taking the leap of faith with me to come on this podcast, because it's just, I feel like I've made a friend.
Yes, absolutely. I feel the same. Yeah. And I want to thank you for this opportunity and for being so insightful and for looking with such attention at my work. It really means a lot. And I'm glad you picked up on some of the key things from my practice. And that's impressive. I love that. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to do this.
Thank you.
And thank you, actually, hold on, just 1 second. Thank you for all the work that you put out there, because I think it is so important and so inspiring, and it should get to as many people as possible, because you are one of the people who will make the world a better place.
Thank you
and
so much.
Actually, you are already doing it.
Thank you, Anna. No, but it means a lot to have your faith, really. Like, thank you. I'm wishing you a beautiful day.
Thank you. You too.
You take care. Bye now.
Bye.